$250 million. That is how much vanished from a federal program built to feed children during the pandemic. 65 people convicted. The ringleader sentenced to 41 years in prison. And the woman who wrote the law that opened the door to all of it just took her seat in Dirksen 628, across from her vice president J.D. Vance. One folder, no notes, no staff behind him. I have spent 30 years watching hearings in this building. Most of them are theater. This is not theater. This has 250 million reasons to be real. Omar did not wait for an invitation. She leaned into her microphone before Vance had finished his opening formalities. Mr. Vice President, let me be very clear from the start. This hearing is political theater. It is the targeting of a black Muslim refugee woman by an administration that has made the persecution of immigrants its entire brand. I reject the premise of this proceeding. I reject the framing, and I will not be used as a prop for your campaign against my community. The gallery behind her erupted in applause. Some people stood for about 15 seconds. It felt like her room. Vance let it finish. He did not interrupt. He did not shift in his chair. When the noise faded, he spoke. His voice was low, measured, the voice of a man who had decided exactly how this day was going to go before he walked into the room. Congresswoman, I respect your journey. This country opened its doors to your family when you needed it most, and you built a life in public service that is worth honoring. 2 sentences. That was all the warmth he would offer for the rest of the afternoon. But I did not bring you here to talk about your story. I brought you here to talk about a law you wrote. He opened the folder 1 page. The Meals Act. You authored it in 2020. It was incorporated into the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act, signed by President Trump. I want to walk through what it changed step by step. Omar straightened. The Meals Act was a bipartisan effort to feed hungry children during a national crisis. It was signed by a Republican president, implemented by his USDA secretary, supported across the aisle. I am proud of that legislation, and I make no apology for trying to feed children during a pandemic. Vance nodded slowly. President Trump signed a 900-page emergency package in 48 hours. Every legislator in Washington attached their provisions to that bill because they knew it would pass. The president did not write your language, Congresswoman. He did not draft your provision. He did not choose to remove the verification requirements. You did. Your name is on the bill. Your language removed the safeguards. Attaching it to a must-pass emergency package does not make it bipartisan. It makes it yours. Omar's jaw tightened. Vance continued before she could respond. Now, let me read what your provision actually changed. Your law allowed for-profit restaurants to participate in the federal child nutrition program for the first time. It eliminated the requirement that meals be served in supervised group settings. It removed documentation standards that had been in place since 2010, and it expanded what they called grab-and-go flexibility, which meant nobody had to verify that a child was actually present when a meal was handed out. He looked up from the page. In plain language, Congresswoman, after your law passed, anyone with a restaurant license could bill the federal government for children's meals. Nobody had to prove the children showed up. Nobody had to prove the meals existed. The guardrails that had protected this program for a decade were gone. You took them out. Omar did not flinch. Those guardrails were bureaucratic obstacles. Schools were closed. Families could not get to meal distribution centers. Children were going hungry in their homes with no way to access the system. We adapted the system to reach them. You adapted the system, Vance said. And after you adapted it, what happened? Criminals exploited it. That is what criminals do. They find gaps in any system and they exploit them. The responsibility lies with the people who committed fraud, not with the legislature who responded to a public health emergency. Criminals find gaps, Vance repeated. Congresswoman, you did not leave a gap. You removed the wall. Before your law, a site had to prove children were physically present to receive meals. After your law, they did not. Before your law, there were documentation requirements, inspections, verification processes. After your law, a restaurant could submit a billing claim for 2,000 meals and no one had to prove a single child walked through the door. Omar pushed back. You are describing the policy in the worst possible terms. The reality is that families were picking up meals from distribution sites because they could not enter buildings. That is why verification requirements were adjusted. Adjusted, Vance said. Not suspended temporarily with a review date, not modified with alternative verification, removed entirely, with no sunset provision, no fraud monitoring, no plan to restore the safeguards when the emergency ended. We were in a crisis. Vance picked up his pen, turned it once between his fingers, and set it down. The room was quiet enough to hear the hum of the air conditioning ducts above the gallery. You were, and so were the criminals who billed the government for 1,000,000 meals that never existed. So let me ask you directly. Before you introduced the Meals Act, did your staff conduct any assessment of fraud risk? Did anyone flag that eliminating verification requirements might create an opening for abuse? Omar's eyes narrowed. We were responding to an emergency. Families needed help immediately. We did not have the luxury of months of bureaucratic review. No review, Vance said. No fraud assessment, no risk analysis. You removed the safeguards and moved on. We fed children. And 65 people in your district were convicted of stealing $250 million. Every dollar of that, Congresswoman, was supposed to be a meal for a child whose family could not afford one. He let that land. Then he reached into the folder. Now, let me show you something. He turned a screen toward the gallery. This is a video from 2020, Somali Television of Minnesota. You are standing in the kitchen of a restaurant called Safari in Minneapolis. You are packing meals into containers, loading them into the trunks of cars. And you say this. He pressed play. The room heard Omar's voice speaking in Somali. Then Vance read the translation. Each day, Safari serves 2,300 meals to families and children. He paused on the number. Let it sit. 2,300 meals a day, Congresswoman. That is what you told your community on camera. Now let me tell you what federal prosecutors discovered. He turned the screen off. The co-owner of Safari Restaurant, Salam Saeed, has been convicted of defrauding the federal government of $16 million. Safari was identified by prosecutors as the #1 sponsor site in the entire Feeding Our Future network. It submitted claims for millions of meals. Federal investigators determined that only a fraction of those meals were ever actually served. Omar responded immediately. I visited a meal distribution site to promote access to food during a crisis. I did not conduct an audit of their books. That is not the function of a member of Congress. You did not audit them, Vance agreed. But you promoted them on camera to your community. You told people to trust Safari. And while you were filming that video, Salam Saeed was billing the government for meals that did not exist. Omar shook her head. I did not know that. Vance leaned forward. Did you ask before you stood in that kitchen and told your community this restaurant was feeding 2,300 children a day? Did anyone on your staff verify that number? Omar deflected. Members of Congress promote community programs every day. Vance did not let it go. They do. But most of those programs do not turn out to be the largest fraud site in a $250 theft. Did you verify the number, Congresswoman? Omar's voice tightened. No. I trusted the operators of the program. Vance repeated her words back to her. You trusted them. And $16 million later, they are in federal prison. Vance closed the folder for a moment. He looked at the gallery, then back at Omar. Every fake meal on that billing statement, Congresswoman, was a real child who did not eat. Every dollar Salam Saeed stole was a lunch that never reached a family that needed it, families in your district, in Minneapolis, during a pandemic when parents had lost their jobs and were wondering how they would feed their children the following week. Omar repeated her defense. I championed feeding children. I will not apologize for that. It was the 4th time she had said some version of that sentence. The room noticed. Vance noticed. She was circling. Somewhere in the gallery behind her, one of her own supporters let out a long, slow breath, quiet enough that the cameras would not catch it. But the people sitting near her heard, and Omar heard. If you are watching this and you can feel what that room was feeling, you are not alone. Stay with me. Because what Vance did next made everything before it looked like a warm-up. Vance changed direction entirely. He reached into the folder and turned to a new page slowly, the way a man turns a page when he knows what is written on the other side. Every pair of eyes in the gallery followed his hand. One sheet of paper, but the room held its breath, waiting to hear what was on it. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped. Let me ask you about Amy Bach. Something crossed Omar's face, slight but visible. Amy Bach, founder and executive director of Feeding Our Future, convicted in March 2025 on federal charges of conspiracy, bribery, and wire fraud. Sentenced this past May to 41 years in federal prison. 41 years. He set that number down like a weight on the table. From her prison cell, Congresswoman Miss Bach gave an interview. She was asked whether you knew about the fraud operating inside the program your law created. Her answer was 5 words. He read from a transcript. I struggled to believe she would not have known. Omar lunged forward. The word of a convicted criminal, a criminal serving 41 years, is not credible evidence. She is desperate. She is looking for someone else to blame, and you are giving her a microphone from the floor of the United States Senate. I am reading a court transcript, Vance said. Pero, let me set Miss Bach's opinion aside, because her opinion is not why I raised her name. He pulled another document from the folder. During Miss Bach's federal trial, prosecutors entered evidence, emails, text messages, communications between the people who were operating the fraud network. Your name, Congresswoman, appears in those communications. He paused. 6 times. He held up 6 fingers. Not in newspaper articles, not in opinion columns, in federal court evidence, in the private communications of people who stole $250 million. Omar's voice sharpened. My name appearing in other people's emails is not proof of involvement. I am a member of Congress. My name appears in tens of thousands of communications every year. That proves absolutely nothing. Tens of thousands, Vance said. Pero, how many of those thousands were entered as evidence in a federal fraud trial? Omar did not answer that. Vance pressed. These were not constituent letters, Congresswoman. These were not thank you notes. Federal prosecutors selected these communications and entered them into evidence because they were relevant to a $250 million fraud scheme. Your law created the program, your video promoted the largest fraud site, and your name appears 6 times in the evidence file. He turned the page over and read from a second exhibit. One of the emails references your congressional office providing assistance with USDA waiver, requests the same waivers that allowed Feeding Our Future sites to operate with minimal oversight, the same waivers that made it nearly impossible to verify whether meals were actually being served. Omar leaned into the microphone. Congressional offices help constituents navigate federal programs every single day. That is called doing our jobs. Helping a constituent access a federal program is not a crime. It is not a crime, Vance agreed. Pero, when the constituent you helped turns out to be operating a fraud site, and the waiver you helped secure is the same waiver that made the fraud undetectable, and the program involved is the program your own law created, that is not constituent service, Congresswoman. That is a pattern. Omar straightened in her chair. Her voice went flat and deliberate. She was drawing a line. Let me be absolutely clear, so there is no ambiguity. My congressional office had no operational involvement with Feeding Our Future. None. We did not manage the program. We did not oversee the sites. We did not direct any funds. None. Vance said nothing. He reached into the folder. He pulled out a single page. He did not rush. He held it up so the cameras could see the letterhead before he read it. This is an email dated the 14th of November 2020. It was sent from your congressional office to the USDA Regional Administrator for the Midwest. The subject line reads, quote, waiver request Feeding Our Future expansion sites, end quote. The email requests expedited approval for 3 new Feeding Our Future meal distribution sites in Hennepin County. It asks the USDA to waive the standard site inspection requirement due to, quote, the urgency of the pandemic and the critical need these sites serve in the Somali community, end quote. It is signed by your chief of staff. He set the page down. 2 of those 3 sites, Congresswoman, are now on the federal indictment list. The operators of both sites have been convicted. Combined fraud from those 2 locations alone exceeds $9 million. The room was completely still. 10 seconds ago, you told this committee your office had no operational involvement. None. That was your word. And I am now holding an email from your office asking the federal government to waive inspections for fraud sites, sent on your letterhead, signed by your chief of staff. Omar opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. My staff handles thousands of constituent requests. I do not personally review every email that leaves my office. You do not review them, Vance said. Pero, your name is on them. Your office sent them, and the sites you helped open stole $9 million from children. That was the moment the room shifted. Not because of the evidence, but because she had lied 10 seconds earlier on the record in front of cameras, and every person watching understood it. From the press row, the sound of keyboards erupted, a dozen reporters typing at once, rapid, urgent. They had their lead story. The clicking lasted about 5 seconds, then stopped all at once because Vance was speaking again, and nobody wanted to miss what came next. He set the document down slowly. Here is what I cannot reconcile, Congresswoman, and I want you to help me. He leaned back. His voice got quieter. The room leaned in. They were learning that when Vance got quiet, something was coming. In February of this year, during the State of the Union address, You rose from your seat in the House chamber and shouted at the President of the United States on live television. You called him a murderer. You called him a liar. You and your colleague, Congresswoman Tlaib, walked out before the President finished speaking. He let the memory settle. You have a voice, Congresswoman, a powerful one. When you choose to use it, the entire country hears you. There is no one in America who doubts your willingness to speak. He looked down at the desk, then back at her. Pero, when the Minnesota House Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Committee invited you to testify about $250 million stolen from children in your district, you did not come. He let that sit. They sent you a letter requesting documents. You missed the deadline. He tapped one finger on the desk. They moved to subpoena your communications with convicted fraudsters. Your Democratic colleagues blocked the subpoena. He stopped tapping. And when a reporter asked you 2 questions in the hallway of this building about your connections to the Feeding Our Future investigation, you walked past without a word. Not one word. He folded his hands. You screamed murderer at the President of the United States on national television. Pero, when 65 members of your own community were convicted of stealing $250 million from children, Congresswoman, you went silent. Explain that to me, I'm asking. Vance reached for his water glass. He took a slow drink, set it down. The room exhaled for the first time in several minutes. Someone in the gallery shifted in their seat. A pen rolled off a desk on the press row and clattered on the floor. Small sounds, human sounds, the kind that only register when everything else has gone completely quiet. Omar turned and looked at her legal counsel. They spoke in hushed voices for several seconds. The microphone caught nothing useful. When she turned back, her voice was tighter, more controlled, the confidence from the opening fraying at the edges. I have cooperated with every legitimate inquiry. What I will not do is participate in politically motivated witch hunts designed to criminalize my existence and weaponize my identity against my community. It was polished, it was practiced, and it did not answer the question. Vance let the non-answers sit in the air. He did not fill the space. Then something unexpected happened. Senator Richardson, the ranking Democrat, reached for his microphone. He had been silent for the entire first hour. The room went completely still. I want to state for the record that I have serious concerns about the partisan framing of this hearing. He paused. The Democrats behind him nodded. Pero, I also want to say this. $250 million in taxpayer funds disappeared from a program that was supposed to feed children. 65 people have been convicted. The courts have done their work. The investigators have done their work. And the American public has a right to clear answers, not from press releases, not through spokespeople, not through lawyers filtering every sentence from the officials who were in a position to know, directly on the record. He was not looking at Vance when he said it. He was looking at Omar. The room absorbed it. A Democratic senator, the ranking member, the man who was supposed to be her shield. He had not attacked her. He had not called her guilty. He had done something worse. He had told her to answer the question, and by telling her, he had told the country that her silence was no longer a strategy, it was a confession by omission. The Democrats behind him shifted uncomfortably. 2 of them reached for their water glasses at the same time. No one moved to add to Richardson's remarks. No one stood to defend Omar. That was the moment the room understood. This was no longer Vance against Omar. It was the question against the silence, and the silence was losing. Behind Omar, her chief of staff pulled out his phone. He held it below the seat back, thumbs moving fast, looking for help, looking for a lifeline, someone to call, someone to send. But there is no cavalry when your own party just told you to answer the question. If you know someone who needs to hear this story, send it to them now, because what comes next is the part no one in Washington wants you to see. Vance waited for Richardson to finish. Then he asked one more question. Congresswoman, your 2024 financial disclosure reported household assets between $6 million and $30 million. In March of this year, you filed an amended disclosure. The new number was between $18,000 and $95,000, a difference of approximately $29,900,000. He read the number slowly, deliberately. Your office described it as an accounting error. Is that your testimony today? Omar's voice was flat. My husband's accountant provided valuations that failed to account for liabilities and debts. The error was identified and corrected. There is nothing illegal about amending a financial disclosure. Nothing illegal, Vance said. $29,900,000 in accounting error. He set the page down. He did not push further. He did not need to. The number was in the room now. It would do its own work. This is the part most people miss. What Vance had done for the first 90 minutes was evidence, documents, videos, court records. He was laying stones in a path, and now the path was complete. Every exit was blocked. Every defense had been used, and he had an answer for all of them. What happened next was not about evidence. It was about a cage. Vance set the folder aside, folded his hands on the desk. "Congresswoman, let me make sure I understand the record." His voice was barely above conversation level, the microphone almost strained to pick it up. "You authored the legislation that removed fraud protections from the federal child nutrition program. You promoted on camera the restaurant that turned out to be the largest fraud site in the scheme. Your name appears 6 times in federal court evidence. The convicted ringleader of the fraud says she believes you knew. You amended your financial disclosure by approximately $30 million, and for 6 months, you have refused to answer questions from every committee, every investigator, and every reporter who has asked. He was not raising his voice. He was not performing. He was listing, and every item on the list was a door closing. Omar tried to interrupt. "That is a deliberate distortion of the facts," Vance continued as if she had not spoken. "So I have 3 questions. You may answer any of them." He held up one finger. "If you did not know about the fraud, why did you refuse to testify before the state committee? You could have walked in, sat down, and said exactly what you are saying now under oath. You chose not to." Second finger, "If you are innocent, why did your colleagues block the subpoena for your communications with convicted fraudsters? If those emails exonerate you, Congresswoman, you should want the whole country to read them." Third finger, "And if this is all a witch hunt, why did you amend your financial disclosure by $30 million 3 months after the investigation became public? Innocent people do not erase $30 million from their financial records and call it arithmetic." He stopped, waited. He reached up and removed his glasses, pulled a cloth from his jacket pocket, cleaned both lenses slowly, and put them back on. The whole room watched him do it. He had nowhere to be, no schedule to keep, all the time in the world. Omar did not pick one. "I will listen." Omar leaned forward. "I did not testify before the state committee because it was a partisan exercise run by a Republican chair who is running for governor. It was designed to generate headlines, not answers." Vance tilted his head. "So the state committee was partisan. Fair enough. What about the House Oversight Committee? Chairman Comer sent a letter requesting financial records related to your husband's companies. Did you cooperate with that request? The House Oversight Committee has been weaponized against Democrats since 2023. Everyone knows that. So the state committee is partisan, the House committee is weaponized. The reporter in the hallway, was she partisan too? Is every single person asking questions about $250 million in missing dollars a political operative? Omar did not answer that question. Vance waited 3 seconds. "Because from where I sit, Congresswoman, the simplest way to prove your innocence is to open the documents, release the communications, testify under oath, say what you are saying right now, but say it where it counts. You have chosen not to do that. Every time, without exception." The silence stretched. Omar's counsel leaned toward her, whispered urgently. She listened, but did not respond to him. She faced Vance. "I will not dignify a process that was designed to criminalize my existence as a black Muslim woman in the United States Congress." Vance repeated 2 words quietly. "Your existence, Congresswoman. 65 people were not convicted because of your existence. They were not sentenced because of your faith or your heritage. They were convicted because they stole $250 million from a program that was supposed to feed children, and you are the person who opened that door on the Democratic side." 2 staffers passed a folded note to Senator Richardson. He read it, looked at Omar, looked at the note again, then he set it face down on the desk. Whatever play they were considering, it died on that piece of paper. Omar's voice rose. This was her final counterattack, everything she had been holding back coming forward. "This is what America does to women who look like me. This is what this administration has done since day one. You target refugees. You target Muslims. You target anyone who does not look like you or pray the way you do. You have deported my constituents. You have raided their homes. You have terrified their children. And now you drag me into a hearing room and demand I prove my innocence while your administration tears my community apart." She was not finished. "You are not interested in children, Mr. Vice President. You are interested in my destruction, because a black Muslim woman in Congress is something your party cannot tolerate. Because I speak truth about what this government does to people who look like me, and every time I do, you find another hearing, another investigation, another headline to try to silence me." It was her strongest moment. The gallery split, some nodded, some shook their heads. The cameras pivoted between Vance and Omar, waiting. What she said was not entirely wrong. That is what made the next 60 seconds so devastating. Because Vance did not dismiss it, he met it head on. He let 3 seconds pass. Then he spoke. "Congresswoman, I grew up in a town where half the kids I went to school with qualified for free lunch. I was one of them. My family needed those meals. There were mornings when that cafeteria tray was the only hot food I was going to see that day." His voice was quiet, almost gentle. The room was absolutely still. "So I know what it looks like when that program works. I know what it feels like to be the kid in that line, and I know what it means when someone steals." Everyone in that gallery understood what was happening. He had spent 90 minutes building toward this moment, laying each stone in order, and now the building was finished. He spoke slowly, each word placed with the precision of a man who had thought about this moment for a very long time. The Feeding Our Future program submitted reimbursement claims for more than 1 million children's meals across the state of Minnesota. Federal prosecutors examined those claims. They found phantom meal sites that existed only on paper. They found billing records for thousands of meals served at locations that were closed. They found one site that claimed to serve 4,000 meals in a single day from a kitchen the size of a bedroom. He paused. The money that was supposed to pay for those meals went somewhere else. Another pause. Then he listed them one by one, no rush. A 5-bedroom house in Burnsville, a Mercedes-Benz in the driveway, a BMW in the garage next to it, a Rolex on the wrist of a man who was supposed to be buying chicken nuggets for a 7-year-old. Wire transfers to bank accounts in Nairobi, in Dubai, in Istanbul. Hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing out of this country, while children in Minneapolis went without lunch. He stopped, let every image land. In 2019, Congresswoman, you gave a speech on the House floor. You said this: "We must hold the powerful accountable. No one is above scrutiny. No one is above the law." Those are your words entered into the congressional record. He let them hang. Do they apply to you? Omar said nothing. You stood in front of a camera in 2020, Congresswoman. You told the people of Minneapolis that Safari Restaurant was serving 2,300 meals a day to families and children. And there it was, the same number she had said on camera 6 years ago, the same promise coming back now as something else entirely. 2,300 meals a day, 3 words hanging. The room was so still that the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside bled through the closed doors, someone walking past. The footsteps grew louder, then softer, then gone, and now there was nothing. Just Vance and Omar, and 4 words. Congresswoman. 1 word. Were the children fed? 4 words, and the room cracked open. Omar did not answer. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Her microphone picked up the faint scrape of paper against the desk. Her counsel shifted in his seat. Somewhere behind the gallery partition, a single camera shutter clicked and stopped. Omar opened her mouth. The microphone caught the small sound of breath being drawn in, the beginning of a word that never arrived. She closed her mouth. Her counsel reached over and touched her forearm. She flinched, pulled her arm back, and then she was still again. She did not speak. Vance did not repeat the question. He did not rephrase it. He did not lean forward or gesture or clear his throat. He sat in absolute stillness, marine stillness, the stillness of a man who had asked the only question that mattered and was willing to wait as long as it took. The question filled the room like pressure. It pressed against the walls, it pressed against the gallery, it pressed against every person who was watching on a screen in their living room at home. 20 seconds of silence in a Senate hearing room is an eternity. This lasted longer. 30 seconds, maybe 40. No one in the gallery coughed. No one checked their phone. No one whispered to the person next to them. They sat in the silence, and they felt it. Omar looked at the desk. Her hands were flat on the surface, palms down, fingers still. She did not reach for the glass of water 2 inches from her right hand. She did not reach for the stack of prepared notes. She did not turn to her counsel, who sat frozen beside her with a pen suspended above a legal pad, writing nothing. She had no answer. Not because she could not find the right words, but because there were no right words. If she said yes, the evidence said she was lying. If she said no, she had just confessed that her law failed the children she claimed to champion. If she said she did not know, she had spent 90 minutes insisting she knew nothing, and one more would change nothing. Every road led to the same place, and Vance had built every one of them. Vance nodded once, slowly. He reached for the gavel. This hearing is adjourned. If this story meant something to you, hit the subscribe button. Not for me, For every child who was supposed to eat that day and did not. Omar left Dirksen 628 through the side exit. No press conference, no statement on the steps, no defiant walk past the cameras. Her chief of staff had a car waiting on First Street. Tim Moline sat in the back seat, phone pressed to his ear. The door closed, the car pulled into traffic, and disappeared. She did not know it yet, but she was not going home to the same career she had left that morning. Within 72 hours, the hearing had been viewed over 40 million times. The clip of Vance asking those 4 words played on every cable network, every news site, every living room television in America. It played in barbershops and diners and VFW halls. It played on phones held by people who had never watched a Senate hearing in their lives. And then the consequences began. The House voted 226 to 203 to strip Ilhan Omar of her remaining committee assignments. 12 Democrats crossed the aisle not because they believed she was guilty, but because they could not go home to their districts and explain why they voted to protect a woman who refused to answer a question about children's lunches. The Department of Justice expanded its investigation. Federal prosecutors subpoenaed communications between Omar's congressional office and Feeding Our Future affiliates. Her attorneys filed motions to block the subpoena. The motions were denied. The documents are now in the hands of a federal grand jury in Minneapolis. In Omar's own district, something shifted that no investigation could have forced. The Somali community leaders who had stood behind her for 7 years began to step away, not loudly, not publicly. They simply stopped appearing at her events, stopped returning her calls, stopped putting her name on their announcements. A community organizer who had chaired her last 3 campaign launches told a local reporter one sentence. She told us that restaurant was feeding our children. It was not. A primary challenger was announced within the month, a Somali-American businesswoman from Omar's own district. A woman who had built a real meal program that actually fed children during the pandemic. A woman who had receipts, real ones. And then her own party finished the job. Democratic leadership quietly removed Omar from the speaker list at 2 upcoming fundraisers. The minority leader was asked by a reporter whether Representative Omar should cooperate with the DOJ investigation. She did not say Omar's name. She said, "Every member of this caucus must be able to answer basic questions about their record." That was all she needed to say. Everyone understood. And somewhere in Minneapolis, there is a school cafeteria where the lunch line got shorter in the fall of 2020, not because fewer children were hungry, but because the money that was supposed to feed them bought someone else a 5-bedroom house in the suburb. A teacher at that school noticed. She told the principal. The principal called the district. The district called the state. The state said the program was operating as designed. It was not operating as designed. It was operating the way Ilhan Omar's law redesigned it. Without guardrails, without verification, without anyone checking whether the children who needed those meals were actually eating them. You knew before this hearing, before the investigations, before the convictions, before the headlines. You looked at this woman and you knew something was wrong. They called you racist for thinking it. They called you bigoted for saying it. They told you that questioning her was the same thing as hating her. You were not hateful. You were not bigoted. You were paying attention, and you were right. J.D. Vance did not hold a press conference after the hearing. He did not post a statement. He did not do a cable news tour. He walked out of Dirksen 628, stepped into a black SUV on Constitution Avenue, and was gone before the cameras could find him. He left behind 4 words. They will follow Ilhan Omar for the rest of her career. They will follow her through every investigation, through every subpoena, through every primary debate, through every interview she refuses to give. They will be waiting for her every time she steps in front of a microphone and tries to change the subject. Were the children fed? If you have made it this far, you are the reason this channel exists. Subscribe if you have not already. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because the people who stole from those children are counting on you to look away. Do not give them the satisfaction.